Sharon Roberts' fingers locked around the man's hand before she gave herself time to hesitate. He looked up at her at once. Korean, early 30s. Tall, controlled, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it made everyone around him look temporary. His face gave away almost nothing, but his eyes sharpened the moment she pulled him to his feet, as if he was already measuring whether she was reckless, desperate, or dangerous. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he asked. His voice was low, calm, the kind of calm that made people around it quieter. Sharon barely heard him. The ballroom was drowning in gold light and soft music. Crystal chandeliers burned above hundreds of guests in couture gowns and black tuxedos. Politicians, investors, celebrities, foreign diplomats, and men whose power never appeared in magazines filled the room with the polished noise of wealth. She was supposed to be singing, not standing in front of a VIP table, not dragging one of the most untouchable men in the room away from his seat in the middle of her set, not making half the audience think this was some bold performance twist. But there was no time to explain. "Come with me," she said under her breath. He did not move. Her grip tightened. "I need you to trust me, right now." A faint crease appeared between his brows. "Why?" Sharon held his gaze, willing herself not to look afraid. "Because if you sit back down," she whispered, "you're going to die tonight." That changed him. Not visibly, not the way it would change most people. He didn't flinch, didn't panic, didn't start scanning the room like a frightened man. He simply looked at her longer, as if he were deciding whether her fear was real. Then, slowly, he stood. A murmur rippled through the ballroom as Sharon pulled him toward the stage. Guests turned in their seats. Some smiled, thinking the singer had chosen a handsome stranger for a surprise audience moment. Others stared harder because there was nothing playful about the way she held his hand. Once they reached the stage, Sharon signaled to the band with a strained smile. "Again," she said softly into the mic. "Something slower." The musicians obeyed. The crowd relaxed just enough to clap. She turned to the man beside her. "Do not leave this stage," she said. His eyes flicked once across the room, then back to hers. "You're either very brave or very foolish," he said quietly. Sharon swallowed. "I'm right." For one suspended moment, it looked as though nothing would happen. The music flowed. The room breathed again. Waiters kept moving. Guests resumed smiling. Then the blast tore through the VIP section. A burst of sparks, a violent crack, shattered glass, smoke rising fast beneath the chandeliers. Screams ripped across the ballroom, chairs overturned. Security lunged forward. The orchestra stopped mid-note. People ducked, shouted, ran. Sharon stood frozen, her heart slamming against her ribs. The man beside her did not move. He stared at the ruined seat below the stage, then turned back to her with a face that had become even harder to read. When he spoke, his voice was almost soft. "How did you know?" To understand how a struggling singer ended up pulling a man like that out of death's path in front of an entire ballroom, we have to go back 4 hours earlier. Sharon stepped out of a taxi in front of the Maison Aurel Grand Hotel with her performance case in one hand and her heels clicking too sharply against the stone. The building rose into the Seoul skyline like it had been designed to insult ordinary people. Glass, marble, gold light, and silence. Even from outside, it looked expensive in the cold, deliberate way only old money and dangerous money ever did. Tonight mattered. A private charity gala, an on-live orchestra, a room full of people who could change careers with a sentence or destroy them with less. Sharon had been booked to sing 2 songs between speeches and auction presentations. It wasn't the kind of opportunity artists dreamed about. She hadn't been chosen because someone believed in her voice. She'd been called because another performer had canceled, and the event director needed someone polished, fast, and forgettable. But after 9 months in Seoul, Sharon had learned to not reject any door that opened, even the ones that opened halfway. The music industry had not welcomed her. Casting teams said she was talented, then went silent. Producers said she had presence, but they were looking for something else. Managers told her to be patient, to network, to wait until the right room noticed her. Sharon had not crossed continents to become background noise in someone else's room. She came to build a name, to be seen, to stop being treated like she should feel lucky just to be invited inside. She entered through the service corridor instead of the front lobby, passing hotel staff, lighting crews, event assistants, and racks of garment covers being rushed toward backstage. No one paid much attention to her. That part, at least, was familiar. In her dressing room, she laid out her pink beaded gown, checked her makeup, adjusted the long crystal earrings that brushed her neck, and began warming up under her breath. That was when she heard the voices. Male, low, sharp, not Korean, Russian. She stilled. The storage room beside hers had not closed fully. Through the narrow gap, she caught the edge of 2 men in dark suits, speaking too quietly for anyone who wasn't already listening. "During the second song," one of them said, "the signal comes when he stands." And the placement? Done, VIP table, near the stage. Sharon stopped breathing. The second man muttered something she couldn't quite catch, then said clearer this time, "Once it starts, no one gets him out in time." A cold wave moved through her body. She glanced at her own reflection in the mirror. The gown, the earrings, the perfect stage face, and behind it, a woman who had just heard murder discussed like a timing cue in a performance schedule. Footsteps approached. Sharon moved back from the door and forced herself to reach for her lipstick just as the men stepped into the hallway. They passed without looking at her twice. Only when they were gone did she let herself breathe. She didn't know who the target was yet. She didn't know why he needed to die. She only knew that when the second song began, someone important in that ballroom was marked for death. And for reasons she still didn't understand, she was the only person in the building who knew. Sharon sat in front of the dressing room mirror long after the hallway outside had gone quiet. The echo of those Russian voices still replaying in her head like a line she couldn't stop singing. For a moment, she just stared at herself. The bright stage lights around the mirror making her skin glow, the pink beaded gown catching every flicker of gold in the room. From the outside, she looked exactly like someone who belonged at a night like this. She didn't feel like she did. 9 months in Seoul had taught her how to smile in places that never expected her to stay. Every job she got felt temporary, like she was filling space until someone else arrived. Casting directors loved to tell her she had presence. Producers said her voice was beautiful. Event managers called her perfect for the atmosphere. And then the calls stopped, or never came at all. Back home, people had told her moving to Korea was bold, brave, different. They said the industry there was growing, that international performers were in demand, that talent could open doors faster than connections. Sharon had believed that. She had packed 2 suitcases, sold her old car, and promised herself she wouldn't come back until she made something real. The first month had been exciting. The second month had been confusing. By the third, she understood the pattern. She was invited when they needed something unusual, something different enough to impress the guests, but not important enough to headline the show. Tonight was exactly that kind of job. 2 songs between speeches, smile for the cameras, leave before the real guests started talking business. She leaned closer to the mirror and adjusted one of her earrings, watching her reflection carefully, the way she always did before a performance. Not because she was checking her makeup, because she needed to see confidence on her own face before she walked out where everyone else would be looking for doubt. "You look like you belong here," she whispered to herself. It was something she said before every show. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Outside the dressing room, music drifted faintly down the hallway, the orchestra rehearsing the same slow piece they had been playing all evening. The sound mixed with the distant hum of voices from the ballroom, low and polished, like the whole building was speaking in a language made of money. Sharon stood, smoothing her hands over the gown, feeling the tiny beads under her fingers. It was heavier than it looked, the kind of dress designed to shine under chandeliers, not under the harsh lights of small clubs where she had spent most of the last year singing for half-empty rooms. She picked up the microphone case from the table and paused at the door. For a second, the doubt came back. Not about the performance, about the room. People like the ones out there didn't notice singers like her unless something went wrong. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and opened the door anyway. If tonight was just another job, she would sing it like it mattered. If tonight was another room that forgot her the moment she left the stage, she would leave it with her head up. And if this was the kind of night where something changed, she had no idea yet how right that feeling was. The hallway outside the dressing rooms was quieter than the ballroom, but not silent. Music drifted through the walls in soft waves, the orchestra tuning and retuning the same slow melody, while staff hurried past with garment bags, trays of glasses, and rolls of cable that snaked across the floor. The air smelled faintly of perfume, dust, and the sharp metal heat from stage lights that have been on too long. Sharon stepped out, closing the dressing room door behind her with care so the latch wouldn't click too loudly. She had learned early that backstage at events like this ran on its own kind of order. Everyone moved fast, spoke low, and tried not to draw attention unless they were supposed to. She adjusted the strap of her microphone case on her shoulder and started down the corridor toward the stage entrance. The sound of her heels on the polished floor felt louder than it should have, each step echoing off the narrow walls as if the hallway itself were listening. Halfway to the corner, she slowed. Voices. Not the quick, casual voices of staff. Lower, controlled. She would have walked past without thinking if one word hadn't caught her ear. Second song. Her steps stopped without her meaning them to. The storage room door beside her was slightly open, just enough for a thin line of light to fall across the hallway carpet. Inside, 2 men stood with their backs half turned to the door, both wearing dark suits that didn't match the hotel staff uniforms. One of them held something small in his hand, metal catching the light for a second before disappearing into his palm. They weren't speaking Korean. Sharon didn't understand much, but she knew enough to recognize numbers, timing, and the tone people used when they didn't want to be overheard. "When he stands," one of them said quietly. The other shook his head. "No mistake. During the second song, the signal comes from the stage." Sharon felt her stomach tighten. She should leave. She knew she should, but her feet stayed where they were, her fingers slowly tightening around the strap on her shoulder. "And the placement?" the first man asked. A pause. Then the second man spoke again, softer this time. "VIP section, near the front, closest to the stage." The words seemed to hang in the air long after he said them. Sharon's eyes moved without thinking, looking down the hallway toward the direction of the ballroom, as if she could see through the walls to the rows of round tables and gold chairs waiting under the chandeliers. Once it starts, no one will get him out in time. A cold wave ran through her chest so fast it almost took her breath with it. She stepped back from the door just as one of the men shifted his weight, the floor creaking under his shoe. For a second she thought he had heard her. Her heart slammed hard enough she was sure the sound would give her away. The door opened wider. Sharon turned quickly, pretending to fix the clasp of her earring, her reflection staring at her from the dark glass of a framed picture on the wall. The two men walked past without looking at her. Their footsteps faded down the corridor. Only then did she let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking. She looked down at them, then at her reflection again, at the perfect makeup, the glittering dress, the calm face she had practiced so many times before walking on stage. Somewhere in the ballroom, the orchestra started the opening notes of the first set. Second song, VIP section, closest to the stage. Sharon swallowed slowly. Someone out there was about to die, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she was the only one who knew it. The stage lights felt hotter than usual when Sharon stepped into them. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. The ballroom shimmered with gold and crystal, the chandeliers casting warm light over rows of perfectly arranged tables. Waiters moved between guests with silent precision, glasses catching the glow as they passed. The orchestra finished the opening piece, and polite applause filled the room, smooth and controlled, the kind of applause people gave because the evening required it. Sharon walked to the microphone with the same calm smile she always used, even though her chest felt tight enough to make breathing difficult. Somewhere in this room, a man was marked to die. VIP section, closest to the stage, second song. Her eyes moved across the tables as the band prepared behind her, careful not to stare too long at anyone. Most of the guests weren't looking at her anyway. They were talking, checking their phones, leaning toward each other in quiet conversations that mattered more to them than whoever had been hired to sing. Then she saw him, front row of the VIP section, exactly where the men had said. A tall Korean man sitting slightly apart from the others, his posture straight, his hands resting calmly on the table in front of him. His suit was black, perfectly fitted, the kind that didn't need decoration to look expensive. His hair was tied neatly at the back, his face expressionless as he watched the stage with the detached focus of someone used to being watched himself. People around him spoke carefully, leaning in when they talked, as if they didn't want to raise their voices near him. Even without knowing his name, Sharon felt it. Power. Her throat went dry. The band began the first song. She forced herself to sing, her voice steady even though her mind kept counting the seconds between each line. She couldn't remember ever being this aware of time, every note feeling like it was moving her closer to something she didn't know how to stop. The first song ended. Applause again, polite, controlled. Her heart started pounding harder. Second song. She glanced toward the VIP table without meaning to. The man hadn't moved. The orchestra started the intro, slow and elegant, the melody floating through the ballroom as if nothing in the world could go wrong under lights like these. Sharon opened her mouth to sing, then stopped. For a split second, the entire room noticed. The band hesitated, unsure. She stepped back from the microphone. Every instinct told her to keep going, to finish the performance, to let security handle whatever was supposed to happen. But she could still hear the voice from the hallway. Once it starts, no one will get him out in time. Before she could talk herself out of it, she walked down the small set of steps at the side of the stage. A few guests laughed softly, assuming it was part of the show. Her heels clicked against the floor as she crossed the space between the stage and the VIP tables, her pulse loud in her ears. The man looked up as she stopped in front of him. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying her face, as if he could already tell this wasn't planned. She held out her hand. "Stand up," she said quietly. He didn't move. The people at the table looked between them, confused. "This isn't part of the program," he said, his voice low. Her fingers closed around his hand anyway. "Please," she whispered, "I need you to come with me right now." His gaze sharpened. "Why?" Her grip tightened, not gentle, not polite, just firm enough that he knew she wasn't playing. "Because if you stay here," she said under her breath, "you're not going to survive this song." For a moment, he just looked at her. Then slowly, he stood. A murmur moved through the ballroom as she pulled him toward the stage, the music still playing, the audience watching with curious smiles, waiting to see what the singer would do next. She climbed the steps, still holding his hand, and turned back toward the band. "Keep playing," she said into the microphone, forcing a smile. The music swelled again. She leaned closer to him, her voice barely audible. "Do not leave this stage." He followed her gaze across the room, then back to her face. "You'd better be right," he said. She swallowed. "I know I am." For one long second, nothing happened. Then the explosion tore through the VIP section behind them. The sound of the explosion didn't end all at once. It cracked through the ballroom like metal tearing apart, followed by the sharp rain of glass and the heavy thud of chairs being knocked over. For a moment, the music kept playing, the orchestra frozen in confusion, before the conductor dropped his hands and the sound collapsed into silence. Then the screaming started. Guests jumped to their feet, some ducking behind cables, others pushing toward the exits in a wave of panic that moved faster than the smoke rising from the VIP section. Security rushed forward, shouting over each other, trying to force order back into a room that had already lost it. Sharon couldn't move. She stood on the stage with her hand still locked around the man's, her heart pounding so hard it made the world feel distant, like she was watching everything from the wrong side of the glass. The chair he had been sitting in was gone. Not broken, gone. Blackened metal twisted upward from the floor, sparks still snapping in the air, the table beside it thrown sideways. The people who had been sitting nearby were being pulled back by security, their faces pale, their voices shaking as they tried to talk all at once. Sharon forced herself to look away. The man beside her hadn't moved. His grip on her hand loosened slowly, not in fear, not in shock, but with the careful control of someone who refused to react before he understood what he was looking at. He stepped forward once, stopping at the edge of the stage, his eyes fixed on the smoking space where his seat had been. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that only she could hear it. "How did you know?" Sharon swallowed, her throat dry. "I heard them, backstage, two men talking. They said the second song, VIP section, near the stage." He turned his head toward her then, fully this time, his expression harder than before, the calm in his face replaced by something colder. "You heard them," he repeated. She nodded. For a moment he just looked at her, like he was deciding what to believe. Then the room changed. Not the noise, not the smoke, not the shouting, the people. Security guards who had been running toward the explosion suddenly slowed when they saw him. One of them stopped completely, straightened his jacket, and lowered his head slightly before speaking into his radio. Two men in dark suits moved through the crowd toward the stage with purpose, not panic, their eyes scanning the room before stopping on him. When they reached the front, they didn't ask if he was all right. They bowed their heads. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "are you injured?" "Sir." Sharon felt the word land heavier than the explosion had. The man didn't answer right away. His eyes were still on the smoke, his face unreadable again, the brief flicker of surprise already gone. "No, I'm fine." The second man leaned closer, his voice lower. "We need to move you now. The director has been informed. The police are on the way." "Police? Director. Sir. Sharon looked between them, her confusion turning into something sharper. You know him? She asked before she could stop herself. The first man glanced at her like he had just noticed she existed, his expression tightening slightly. The man beside her finally looked down at her again. For the first time since she had grabbed his hand, there was something different in his eyes. Not anger, not fear, recognition. You don't know who I am, he said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head slowly. The two men beside the stage exchanged a quick look, then stepped back, as if the answer no longer mattered. The man straightened his sleeve, as calm as if the room around him wasn't filled with smoke and shouting. My name, he said quietly, is Kang Eryun. The name meant nothing to her, but the reaction around them did. People who had been running stopped when they heard it. A waiter nearly dropped the tray in his hands. One of the security guards lowered his eyes without being told. Sharon felt the air in her chest go cold. She hadn't just pulled a stranger onto the stage. She had just dragged one of the most feared men in the room out of the seat meant to kill him. The ballroom never fully recovered that night. Even after the smoke cleared and the guests were escorted out in careful, controlled groups, the air still felt wrong, like the walls themselves had heard too much. Police moved through the room with quiet urgency, speaking to security, checking the damaged floor, taking photos of the twisted metal where the VIP table had been. No one laughed anymore. No one spoke loudly. The music never started again. Sharon sat alone in her dressing room, still in the pink gown, her hands resting in her lap as if she had forgotten how to use them. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the chair explode again. Every time she opened them, she heard the name, Kang Eryun. She had asked one of the event assistants who he was, trying to sound casual, like she was only curious. The girl had gone pale before answering. You don't know? She whispered. He owns half the companies that sponsor these events, and the other half don't exist without him. That wasn't an answer, but it was enough to make Sharon stop asking. A knock came at the door. Soft, careful. She looked up, expecting another staff member, maybe someone to tell her she could go home. Come in, she said. The door opened just enough for Laurent Virel, the event director, to step inside. His perfect suit looked slightly wrinkled for the first time all evening, his usually smooth expression tight around the eyes. You're still here? He said quietly. I didn't know if I was supposed to leave. He hesitated, then nodded once. You can. The police have finished asking questions. She stood slowly, her legs still unsteady from the adrenaline that hadn't fully left her body. Is everyone okay? She asked. Laurent's mouth pressed into a thin line. No one died. That's all anyone is saying tonight. His eyes studied her for a second longer, like he wanted to ask something else, then thought better of it. You should go home, Sharon. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be complicated. She almost asked what that meant, but she didn't. She changed quickly, folding the gown back into its garment bag, wiping the last of the stage makeup from her face until the woman in the mirror looked like herself again, instead of the performer from earlier. Outside, the hallway was nearly empty. Most of the staff had already left, their voices echoing faintly from the far end of the corridor. Sharon walked toward the exit slowly, her heels in one hand, her bag over her shoulder, the quiet feeling heavier than the noise had been. Her phone rang. The sound made her jump. She frowned, pulling it out of her bag. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize, no name, no country code she knew. For a second, she thought about letting it ring. Then she answered. Hello? Silence. Just the faint sound of breathing on the other end. Her grip tightened on the phone. Who is this? A man's voice came through, low and rough, the words slow, like he wanted to make sure she understood every one. You should not have touched him. Her heart skipped. What? You were not part of the plan. You were supposed to sing, smile, leave. Her mouth went dry. Who is this? A short, humorless chuckle. You saved the wrong man tonight. The line went quiet for a second. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time. Now you are part of the problem. The call ended. Sharon stood frozen in the cold air, the phone still pressed to her ear, the empty line buzzing faintly. Slowly she lowered it, her pulse starting to race again, faster than it had even in the ballroom. She didn't know who the man was, she didn't know how he got her number, but she understood one thing with terrifying clarity. The explosion hadn't been the end of the night, it had only been the beginning, and somehow, without meaning to, she had just made herself a target. The days after the gala passed in a strange, quiet blur. No one called to cancel her next performance, but no one mentioned the explosion either. The event never appeared in the news. Online, the only thing anyone talked about was the charity auction, the guest list, the dresses, the orchestra. It was as if the blast, the smoke, the panic, all of it, had been erased the moment the ballroom doors closed. Sharon tried to tell herself that was a good thing. If no one talked about it, maybe no one was looking for her either. Still, the phone call stayed in the back of her mind, replaying when the room got too quiet. You saved the wrong man tonight. Now you are part of the problem. She checked the locks in her apartment every night before going to bed. She kept her phone close, even when she was rehearsing, even when she was on stage. She told herself she was being paranoid. Until the next show. It was a smaller event this time, a private corporate party in one of the upper floors of a hotel overlooking the river. Nothing like the gala. Fewer guests, softer lights. No orchestra, just a small band and a low stage set near the windows. Normal. That was what she wanted. Normal. She finished her last song to polite applause, smiling as she thanked the audience, the way she always did, the way she had done 100 times before. The guests clapped, some already turning back to their conversations before she even stepped away from the microphone. Just another performance, just another night. Backstage, the hallway was narrow and dim, the sound of the party fading as soon as the door closed behind her. She slipped off her heels and carried them in one hand, her bag in the other, her body already relaxing now that the lights weren't on her anymore. At the end of the corridor, the exit sign glowed red above the service door. She pushed it open and stepped into the stairwell. The door closed behind her with a heavy click. For a moment, the silence felt good. Then she heard footsteps, not from above, not from below, behind her, slow, measured, not trying to hide. Her stomach tightened as she turned. 2 men stood near the door she had just come through, both in dark jackets, both watching her in the same quiet way that made her skin go cold before her mind understood why. "You are Sharon," one of them said, not a question. Her grip tightened on her shoes. "Who are you?" The second man smiled faintly, but there was nothing friendly in it. "You need to come with us." Her heart started pounding. "I'm not going anywhere." The first man took a step closer. "You interfered with something that didn't concern you. Now someone wants to talk to you." The words hit harder than the movement. Her mind flashed back to the phone call, to the voice telling her she had saved the wrong man. Her feet moved before she realized she had decided to run. She turned and rushed down the stairs, her bare feet slapping against the concrete, her breath coming fast and sharp as she grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Behind her, the footsteps followed, faster now, closer. She reached the next landing and shoved the door open, stumbling back into the hallway, her eyes darting around for anyone at all. Guests stood near the bar at the far end, laughing, completely unaware. "Help!" A hand grabbed her arm before the word finished. Her body jerked hard as the man pulled her back, his grip like iron around her wrist. "Don't make this difficult," he said under his breath. Sharon twisted, trying to pull free, panic rising so fast it made her dizzy. Then the man's grip suddenly loosened, not because she got away, because someone else had grabbed him. The hallway went still. Sharon turned, her heart hammering, and saw a tall figure standing behind the man, one hand locked around his shoulder, his expression calm in a way that made the air feel colder. Kang Eryun didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the man he was holding. "You chose the wrong night," he said quietly. And for the first time since the explosion, Sharon felt something stronger than fear. Relief. The hallway stayed silent for several seconds after the man stopped struggling. Kang Eryun released his grip slowly, like he had never needed strength in the first place. The man staggered back a step, clutching his shoulder, his face tight with pain he was trying not to show. The second one had already backed away, his eyes moving between Eryun and the guests at the far end of the corridor, calculating whether this was still a situation he could control. It wasn't. "Leave," Eryun said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The two men hesitated only long enough to look at each other, then turned and walked quickly toward the stairwell without another word. The door shut behind them with a dull thud that echoed down the hallway. Only then did Eryun turn. His eyes went straight to Sharon. "You're not hurt?" he said. It wasn't a question. She shook her head, her breath still uneven, her wrist aching where the man had grabbed her. "No, I'm fine." He studied her for another second, as if deciding whether he believed her, then nodded once. "We're leaving." The words came so simply that for a moment she didn't understand them. "What?" "This place isn't safe for you anymore," he said. "Come with me." Something in his tone made arguing feel pointless, but her feet still didn't move. "I don't even know where you're taking me." His expression didn't change. "Somewhere they can't reach you." Her chest tightened. "Who are they?" For the first time, a faint shadow passed through his eyes. "The men you heard that night weren't acting alone," he said, "and the ones who just tried to take you weren't improvising." He glanced down the hallway once, then back at her. "You interfered with a plan that was meant to start a war. People like that don't forget." The word war made her stomach drop. She looked toward the stairwell, then back at him. "So what, I'm just supposed to hide now?" "For tonight," he said. Something about the way he said it made it clear that tonight wasn't the part that worried him. She hesitated one more second, then nodded. Outside, the parking level was almost empty, the sound of the party above reduced to a faint vibration through the concrete ceiling. A black car waited near the far wall, engine already running, the driver standing beside the door as if he had known exactly when they would arrive. Eryun opened the back door without speaking. Sharon paused before getting in, her hand resting on the edge of the door. "This happens to you a lot?" she asked quietly. His mouth moved slightly, not quite a smile. "More than I would like." She slid into the leather, cool against her skin, her hands finally starting to shake now that the danger wasn't right in front of her anymore. The door closed. The car pulled out of the garage without hesitation, turning into the night streets as if the driver already knew the route by heart. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. City lights passed across the window in long streaks of gold and white, reflecting faintly in the glass between them. Sharon stared at her own reflection, then at his. "You knew they were coming," she said finally. "Yes." And you didn't tell me? His gaze stayed on the road ahead. I told people to watch you. That's not the same thing. No, he said quietly. It isn't. The car slowed as it turned through a high metal gate that opened before they even reached it. The building beyond it looked nothing like a hotel, nothing like an apartment, nothing like anywhere she had ever been before. No sign, no lights in the windows, just dark walls and cameras mounted at every corner. The car stopped. Eryun opened his door, then looked at her. You'll stay here for now, until I know exactly who ordered this. She stepped out slowly, her heart still racing, her mind trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the last hour. And if they come again? She asked. He closed the door behind her and met her eyes. They won't. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt. I won't let them. The building was quieter than any place Sharon had ever stayed. No music, no traffic, no voices through the walls. Even the air felt different, heavy with the kind of silence that didn't happen by accident. The room they had given her was large, carefully furnished, but nothing personal. No pictures, no decorations, just clean lines, soft lighting, and windows that didn't open. Safe, or at least safer than anywhere else she could think of. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the explosion again, the phone call, the footsteps in the stairwell. By the time the faint gray light of morning reached the edge of the curtains, she had already given up trying. A knock came at the door, not loud, not urgent. She stood slowly, her body stiff, and crossed the room before opening it. One of the men she had seen with Eryun the night before stood outside, his expression polite but unreadable. He wants to see you, he said. She didn't ask who. There was only one person it could be. The hallway outside the room stretched long and quiet, the floors so polished her footsteps barely made a sound. The man led her down 2 turns, past another door, then stopped in front of a wide office with dark glass walls. He opened it without knocking. Kang Eryun stood near the window, his back to the room, one hand in his pocket as he looked out over the city. He was dressed the same as always, black suit, perfect lines, not a single sign that he had slept any less than she had. He turned when she entered. You should be resting, he said. I tried. His eyes studied her face for a moment. Then he nodded slightly, as if that answer was expected. It's over, he said. She blinked. What is? The man who ordered the attack. Her chest tightened. You found him already? Yes. He walked past her toward the desk, picking up a tablet and setting it down in front of her. On the screen was a photo of a man in his 50s, sharp suit, cold eyes, the kind of face that looked like it belonged in boardrooms and courtrooms, not in police files. Jang Do-sok, Eryun said. He runs import companies, shipping contracts, private security firms, most of them legal, some of them not. Sharon looked up. You tried to kill him? He tried to start a war, Eryun corrected. She frowned. Why? Because if I was gone, everything I control would be divided between people like him. He tapped the screen once, and the image changed to another photo, this time of flashing lights outside a building, police cars lined along the street. He won't get the chance. Her eyes moved back to him. What happened? I gave the police what they needed, he said simply. Evidence, names, accounts, enough that they couldn't ignore it. She stared at him, trying to understand how calmly he was saying it. He's arrested? Yes. And that's it? For now. He held her gaze, his expression steady but colder than she had ever seen it. He wanted the explosion to start chaos, to force people to choose sides. If that had happened, a lot of people would have died. Her hands tightened at her sides. Including me? Yes. The word landed harder than she expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt too quiet again, the kind of quiet that made every thought louder. She looked back at the photo on the screen, then at him. "You did all this because of what happened that night?" His answer came without hesitation. "I did it because he crossed a line." A pause. Then his eyes softened just slightly. "And because he decided you were part of the plan." The first time Sharon stepped onto a stage again after the explosion, her hands trembled just enough for her to notice. No one else did. The theater lights were softer than the chandeliers at the gala, but they still felt too bright, too warm, as if they were asking her the same question everyone else had been asking for weeks without saying it out loud. "Are you the singer from that night?" The story had spread in pieces at first, a rumor about an explosion at a private event, a whispered name, a video clip someone had recorded on their phone showing her pulling a man onto the stage seconds before the blast. It never became official news, but in the circles where people paid attention to things that didn't make headlines, everyone knew. And suddenly, people knew her too. Her phone started ringing in ways it never had before. Event managers who had ignored her messages were calling back. Agents who once told her to wait were asking when she was free. One performance turned into 3, then 5, then a contract for a full concert series she would never have been offered a month earlier. No one said it was because of what happened. They said it was her voice, her presence, her professionalism under pressure. Sharon didn't argue. She just said yes. Tonight's show was the biggest one yet, a full hall, every seat filled, the kind of audience she used to imagine when she practiced alone in her apartment. The orchestra behind her was larger than any she had worked with before, the sound swelling around her as the lights came up and the applause rolled through the room like a wave. She stepped to the microphone, her pink gown catching the light, her heart beating fast but steady this time. Not fear, not exactly, something else. She began to sing. The first note carried across the hall, clear and strong, the way it always did when she stopped thinking about who was watching. The music flowed, the orchestra following her voice, the audience quiet in the way that meant they were really listening. Halfway through the song, her eyes moved across the crowd without meaning to. She almost missed him. Near the back, not in the front row where the sponsors sat, not in the VIP section where the cameras pointed, just another seat in the shadowed part of the hall, far enough that most people wouldn't notice who was there. But she did. Kang Eryun sat with his hands folded loosely in front of him, his posture straight, his expression calm, the dark suit blending into the dim light like he had chosen that seat on purpose. He wasn't clapping, wasn't speaking, just watching. For a second, the note in her throat wavered, so slightly no one else would hear it. Her eyes met his, and the memory of the ballroom, the smoke, the explosion, the moment she grabbed his hand without knowing his name, all rushed back at once. He didn't smile, he never did, but his gaze didn't move away either. She looked back toward the lights, forcing herself to focus on the music, on the sound of her own voice filling the hall, on the fact that she was standing here now because she hadn't stayed quiet that night. The song ended. The applause came fast, louder than she expected, people rising from their seats as the orchestra lowered their instruments. Sharon bowed once, then lifted her head again, her eyes searching the crowd without meaning to. The seat near the back was empty. For a moment, she thought he had already left. Then she turned slightly toward the side of the stage and saw him standing near the exit, one hand in his pocket, watching her with the same calm expression he always wore, as if the noise around him didn't exist. Their eyes met again across the distance. He gave the smallest nod. Not a bow, not a smile, just enough to say he was there, just enough to remind her that the night she thought had ruined everything was the night everything had started to change.
Before you go, make sure you subscribe to the Korean Boss Diaries for more stories about the Korean Mafia boss, hidden enemies, and the people who get pulled into his world without warning. New stories are coming, and next time, the danger might be even closer.